Mohammad Rizwan is saying, sir, due to the time. Factor because that means you could do that. You could attempt that at least to some of the one or two method you can, but some of you might have attempted, but other members they have not even touched that particular question. Yeah, it's showing my internet connection is not stable. Is it okay now or still it is lagging? Is it okay? Okay. So let's start the session for today. So today's session, basically, before starting the today's session, let's quickly recap the last session, what we discussed. Last session, we started to see the architecture of web application. What is a web application? Basically, it is a combination of static and dynamic web resources plus some configuration file. That means it is a combination of static plus dynamic web resources plus some configuration file. And that file basically it will be deployed, that the entire application will be deployed where? On the server. Either you can use Tomcat server or either you can use the application server. But this entire application will be maintained in the server by using which container? Give me the answer. कौन सा container आपके web application को manage करता है? Because in both the server there is a one container is there. Container has a very big role in a server. So who will manage your web application? That is your servlet container. Servlet container or web container. That container will manage your web application. जब भी हम बात करते हैं manage our web application, इसका मतलब क्या होता है? To providing the entire infrastructure to execute our web application. Because इसमें जो dynamic web resources हैं, ये हमारे Java के classes होंगे. उन classes का object बनाना, उनके method को call करना, और उनके object को destroy करना, everything will be taken care by this container. Now, then after we discuss that the role of servlet and JSP. Role of a servlet and JSP in web application development. Right. इस servlet और JSP का क्या role है web application develop करने के लिए? Both are what? Dynamic web resources. Dynamic web resource जिससे कि हम dynamic HTML generate करते हैं. By using that we can generate the dynamic HTML. We have seen some idea about the servlet. Servlet is basically an interface, and we have to write a class which implement this interface, and we need to write the dynamic content logic, dynamic page creation logic inside the service method, right? And that method having the two parameters, HTTP servlet request and response. HTTP servlet request, by using that we can basically, the method name is public. We write that class itself. That is, you need to write a class called myServy. It should be going to implement servlet interface, and that servlet interface is basically having one method called public. Can say that servlet request REQ and servlet response RES. So this is the basic method. Using that method, inside this method only you need to write the page generation logic. And this method having two main objects is there. This object will be provided by your servlet container. Container will create this object and expose this object inside the container, will create the object of the servlet request and response for you and expose this object inside the service method parameter. Using this object, what you can do, you can gather or get the client request. That means whatever the client has sent the data, that data you can access. And using this object, what you can do, you can generate the response page. Am I clear? Please confirm. Good. So this is the role of servlet. We have seen that this is a Java class where we used to write our what? The HTML code. Then after we have seen that, what is the role of JSP? JSP came as an alternate of servlet, but instead of replacing the servlet, it has complemented the servlet. And then by combining these two approach, we just discussed about that MVC approach came. MVC design pattern. You can say that MVC pattern. This is a particular one pattern. In that pattern, by using that, if you create a web application, industry told that if you create your application using this pattern, then your application will become much more maintainable. एक ही application बनाने के कई तरीके हैं. आप सारे कोड एक ही क्लास में क्लब कर दो, so it will not become a standard practice, or you can say that not maintainable. But if you create this web application using this pattern, then your application will be much more maintainable. And it was the industry standard. It has become the industry standard to develop any kind of web application using this particular pattern. And not only that, here, not only the Java web application, even if you go to the React or Angular, so there also MVC, even the ASP.NET. So those kind of backend and front-end programming nowadays, they are also using MVC pattern. In that MVC pattern, what we used to do that servlet will act as a controller, which will take the request, and then it will forward, it will process the request. Basically, view will be considered as your JSP. That means servlet should not generate the response. So this object should not be used to generate a response page. Instead, this object is used to redirect that page to the JSP. And JSP will take that data and it will print the data. So JSP will take the responsibility of view. Servlet will take the responsibility of controller, and model nothing but your application data. वो application data जिस पे data को process करने वाले. The data which is going to be processed in our application, basically that object that act as a model. And then we discussed that this is the MVC architecture. And what are the role of this MVC? Last class we discussed. So let's quickly go through that. This is a web application. What is a web application? Where it is tied on application server or web server? What is the role of that? Static page, dynamic page, we discussed last class. If you hit a particular URL, how it will going to resolve? Basically, what is the URI? What is the URL? The difference between URL and URI. We discussed about that. Then we discussed that how to create a servlet, and inside that, this you might wonder about that here. Sir, you have written HTTP servlet request, HTTP servlet response. But here in this example, you have written servlet request, servlet response. Basically, servlet request and servlet response ये दोनों interface हैं, और ये दोनों उसके child interface. मतलब this is the parent interface and this is the child interface. Right? So basically, inside the service, we should not implement this servlet. Instead, हमें क्या करना चाहिए? We should extend the generic one HTTP servlet class is there. That class we should extend. So if you refine this method once again, like that in the servlet, there is a class. It should not be created like this, like my SRV implement servlet. क्योंकि ये काफी basic चीजें हैं. क्यों? Because in this one servlet, we have total 5 methods are there, not only one method. We need to override 4 other methods also. 4 other methods also. I might have written here 4 other methods also, right? But instead of, suppose this methods, if you need that some other activity, then you can override. Like in most of the cases, we don't need this type of method, 4 methods, unnecessary. Why to override? And better approach we have given. What is that? Instead of implementing the servlet, we should extend HTTP servlet class. Servlet interface को extend करने की बजाय HTTP servlet class को आप extend कर लो. इस HTTP servlet, this is the implementation of your servlet. Servlet का ये predefined एक implementation है, and you can override the service method. And here in this method, you will get that HTTP power, HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response, which is more stronger than your normal servlet request and normal servlet response. Okay, now let's move ahead. And here, then after we have seen that here, how the container will going to manage. Container will create the object of servlet request and response and pass the parameter to the service method. What is the role of JSP we discussed? What is the architecture of traditional web application we discussed? Then we discuss the architecture of MVC. Also, we discuss what is a model view controller. And then after we discuss that with this particular architecture, to simplify our work, some third-party company came and they have developed some framework. So some third-party company came and they developed some web Java-based web framework. जैसे struts, JSF, Spring MVC. ये सारे अलग अलग कंपनी के फ्रेमवर्क हैं. They will ease our work. ये हमारे काम को आसान बना देते हैं. कैसे? So instead of giving the servlet or writing the servlet yourself and writing that flow control logic yourself, manage that servlet, they have given one servlet, ready-made servlet to you with all the flow control. Like servlet technology, they have given action servlet, JSP face servlet, and Spring MVC dispatcher servlet. तो ये कहते हैं कि सर्वलेट आप मत बनाइए, आप हमारे फ्रेमवर्क का सर्वलेट यूज कर लो. So just configure this servlet in your application and customize this servlet accordingly. So it has, you can say that, reduce the burden to the developer. Then after we discuss this Spring MVC, we discussed about this. So Spring MVC developer need not develop any servlet class. Instead of that, framework has given a servlet which having all the flow control logic. The servlet name is dispatcher servlet. Remember this name. It will act as a front controller. That means whatever request will come, this dispatcher servlet will trap the request. And after that, we need to install the web server and application server, and we need to deploy the application. Then after we have seen that how our application, web application look like, we just package them, or in a proper folder structure, we arrange them, all those files, create a war file and deploy that on a server. And then we discussed about the communication channel between client and server. Communication channel is your HTTP protocol. जिससे client मतलब browser या फिर कोई और भी application you can think, and the server, how the communication will work. For that one, we discussed about HTTP protocol, and in that we discussed that is how many type of client could be there. And then we discussed that how to give the request of get and post. And we discussed about that HTTP request structure. जो रिक्वेस्ट हम भेजते हैं वो सिर्फ रिक्वेस्ट ही नहीं हुए, उसके अंदर बहुत सारे डेटा होता है by using a particular format or pattern. We have seen that particular diagram. We discussed that about the request header. Request headers are what? Apart from the client request, client data, some extra data also you want to send. Some of the data is are already there, but you can create your own header also, like bearer token, some extra information also you can send to the client. और जब ये response आता है, the response also having a particular structure, and that response structure क्यों use होता है? To response to the client. That means which type of response is generated. It also having a structure where we discuss about that, what is the status code, what are the response header, and what are the response body. I hope till this point everyone is comfortable. Please confirm. Anyone having any query? Good. Now let's move ahead and see that and start that. Today's basically what the topic we are going to discuss. So today first we are going to discuss about the data part. That means how we are going to send the data. And then today itself we are going to learn the Spring Boot and our try to generate the REST API today itself. So first let's talk about the sending data to the server along with HTTP request. अब जो request हम भेजते हैं तो उससे हमें data भेजना है. कौन request भेजता है? Client. How the client will send the data also to my server. So from the browser, if your client is a browser, remember this point. If the client is a browser for a web application, then from the browser we send the request for a web application using either get or post method. या तो आप get method से use कर सकते हो या फिर post method. कब? जब ये आपका web application है and client is a browser. अब ये get कब होता है, post कब होता है? You might have used that in your HTML. Get, let's say that somebody is typing in a URL and hitting the URL, then it generates the get request. Somebody is clicking on a hyperlink, it will generate the get type of request. Get, ये सर get और post है क्या? ये HTTP के methods हैं, तरीके हैं कि किस तरह से request को आप भेज रहे हो. By clicking any button, that could also generate a get request. पोस्ट का जनरल सिनेरियो कब है? जब हम किसी फॉर्म को सबमिट करते हैं, किसी फॉर्म पेज को सबमिट करते हैं जिसमें सेंसिटिव इंफॉर्मेशन हो, यूजर नेम एंड पासवर्ड हो, or registration form. That time we most of the time we use the post method. Or if you want to upload any file or image or videos, that time also we use the post method. Now using get also we can send the data. If you send the data using get method, the data will travel through the URL. अब ये बात ध्यान से समझना, हम get method के साथ भी डेटा भेज सकते हैं. ये दो मेथड है. पोस्ट के साथ सब फॉर्म जब हम सबमिट करेंगे तो कुछ डेटा भेज रहे हैं, and we will try to upload a form. That time also we are sending the data. तो डेटा पास कर सकते हैं. अब पास करने में हम गेट से डेटा पास करेंगे तो दैट डेटा विल बी अपेंडेड ऑन, इट विल बी विजिबल टू द यूआरएल. Prince Kumar is saying that lagging a lot. I guess it is because my net connection is not so stable. Just give me 1 sec. Now is clear now? Good. Prince, is it okay or still it is lagging? Good. So basically हम get तरीके से भी डेटा भेजते हैं, लेकिन ध्यान रखना ये बात, if you send the data using get, then the data will travel through URL. That means वो डेटा आपको आपके URL में दिखाई देगा, like this, right? See that here I try to open the Zoom link and this is my website name basically, and this is nothing but your data. These things are nothing but your data. So we are going to talk about that. So this is basically your get type of request. So get तरीके से जो request भेजोगे, the data will travel through the URL and it will be visible. To the user. So for the conclusion is what here? We never send the sensitive data using get method. I hope that you can understand why we should not send the sensitive information like CVV number, password, and all those things. Get is obviously, Abhijit is saying that, sir, which is the faster, get, post, or put? Get is always faster. Why? We are going to talk about that. Let me first conclude the post, then after I will tell the reason why the get is faster than other methods. Okay, now let's see that the next one. Whereas if you send the data using post, अगर हम post से data भेजते हैं, then the data will be travel using the HTTP request body. That means whatever data you are going to send, it will not going through the URL. It will travel through the body. Let's recall that when we discussed about the HTTP request structure, that time we have seen that what the request initial request line, then after request headers, and then request body. So whatever the data you are going to send through the post, it will travel through the request body. So basically what will be happening here? These data will not be visible. Will not be visible to the user because it will be embedded. It will be embedded on a request body. So you can choose if you have the sensitive information like password or CVV number or OTP, those type of data you can send through the request method post. So in web application, normal or traditional web application, you can see that we always send the data using get method or post method to send the request. But if you have the web services, last class we discussed about that, what is the difference between web application and web services. Web application means the client will be the browser only, but web services means what? It will generate the data in a form of XML or JSON format. Web application will generate that view, that means HTML format. So if you are developing a web application, we prefer get and post method, only get or post. But if you are using the web services, you are sending the data only, or API you are creating, that time basically we use that put method also, delete method also, patch method also. Now let's see that if you are sending the data, how many way we can send the data. The first way is what? Request parameter. Using request parameter, these are the key value pair. Just now we have seen this example on the Zoom. Like this is that the data. This is, you can say that is the request parameter. This data is called request parameter. And how many ways are there to send the request parameter? We have this get method, delete method, post, put. That means using almost all the HTTP method, we can send the data using request parameter. For example, let's say that I want to send a request on index.jsp. So this is your URI. To this URI, I want to send some data. So how I will send the data? Let's say that I want to send only one data. So I need to send, let's say that this is my URI index.jsp. Let's say that I'm using index.html. Imagine this is my index.html homepage. It is configured. And to this one, I want to send some data. So I can here, I put that here question mark. And this request parameter is having key value pair. So roll number, this is a key, and then after give the value. This is called one request parameter. But you can think like that HTML is a static page. This static page does not have the capability to fetch this data. HTML cannot fetch this data. So in order to get the dynamic content, we can use here what? Instead of HTML, I can use JSP. JSP is a dynamic content, or you can say the dynamic web resource, which has the capability of fetching this type of data. That's why I have mentioned that index.jsp. So this is your request parameter. If you see this, your Zoom link, I just tried to open. Let me copy this. And see this URL. How this URL is looking like. So see this is our URI. This URI could be in a backend application related URI. And to this one, this is a one set of data we have sent here. Mn is equal to this type of some one key is there. You can say that this is a one token. One token they have sent to authenticate, because Zoom internally uses Auth2 or other framework to authenticate a particular person. So here, one set of request parameter we have sent. Suppose that if you want to send a multiple set of request parameter, then in that case, we need to use ampersand operator here. And so rol is equal to 123, one set of data, and name is equal to Ram, and marks is equal to 100. So here three request parameters are there. And this thing's entire URI and the request parameter is known as query string. That is URI along with request parameter. ये सारी चीजों को मिला के हम क्या कहते हैं? We can say that it is a query string. But one set of data is called one request parameter. So you can say that in this query string, we have three request parameters. Now, the second way to send the data using path variable. Now, what is this path variable? Path variable or path parameter also, you can say that. So in this path variable, it does not have the key. ये भी एक तरीका है data send करने के लिए, but it does not have a particular key. Here also, you can take the advantage of all type of HTTP method. Get, put, post, delete, any type of method you can use. And how the data will be sent. So this is your URI. And if you want to send only one data, let's say that I'm giving that index.jsp and only one data I want to send. Right. So the meaning of that, this is the 10. What is this 10 here? So 10 is a path variable or path parameter. Prince Kumar is saying that any value only can be in a string format in this. Yes, all the value, whatever you are passing, it will be in a string format. But it will be totally depend upon your framework or the developer to get the data and pass that in an appropriate format. Right. Now, here this is a one set of data. This is a one set of path variable. Matlab, with the path, whatever data you are sending. Remember, this path variable don't have the key. Like here key value pair, but here only key. But if you want to send other data, also just give that here, any name or whatever. Let's say that here Delhi. So this has become what? One path variable. This is another path variable. Direct data you can send through the path. This is called path variable. So this is two set of data I'm sending, 1 to 3 and one particular name. So this is the second way to send the data. The third way to send the data using what? Using request body. And if you're trying to send the data using request body, you can take the help of only post method or put method. You cannot take the help of get method and delete method. Why, sir? Because get and delete don't support the request body. They won't support the request body. You have to use either post or put if you want to send the data using request body. So remember, whenever you have some sensitive data you want to send, that data you have to send either using post method or put method. Don't ever use the get method to send this sensitive information. I hope you know the reason why we should not send. Because it will be visible on a URL on a browser and it will not be secure. Now, if you're sending the data using request body, what data kis tarah ka hoga? Which kind of data will be? The data could be in a JSON format, could be in a XML format like XML data. Let's say that I want to send some student related information using body. So this is a JSON object. I hope everyone is aware with the JSON object. Please confirm. So this is the one set of JSON object where the key should be in a double quote and value will be as it is. This is your XML data. The same is here. I want to represent one student object. The same object I have mentioned through the XML format. XML is a tag based. In our early days, we always use what XML data, but XML data is or tag based data. Basically, it is little bit what difficult to just manage this data. Why? Because we need to just pass this tag and we need to collect the data, collect this data, and again we need to convert that in a Java object. And XML is a different technology. You have to make sure that somebody has used the correct tags, right? So for that one, you need to write your XSD file or schema file to verify this tag. So other headache is there. You have to worry about the data. You have to worry about the tag also, right? If somebody is entering the wrong tag, which data does not exist, let's say that address, so it will be invalidated. In fact, instead of somebody has given that instead of marks or mark here, so that XML should be invalidated. So that's why nowadays everyone is preferring the JSON data. JSON data is most popular format to send the request or to exchange the information from client to server. But remember, lots of companies are still using this XML approach. Make sense? So these are the data. Using that, you can send that using request body. Not only that, you can send the data form data also. Form data means what? By submitting the form page or uploading any file. Say that you want to upload any particular file like a PDF file or Excel sheet or any image file. If you want to upload, then you have to use the post method or put method. Okay, now the next thing is that here we are going to discuss about the Spring MVC a little bit in depth. So you'll get the entire clarity about the Spring MVC. Spring MVC we already discussed yesterday. That means last session. What is the main advantage of using Spring MVC? Give me the answer. What is the main advantage of using the Spring MVC framework? Very good, Assis. The main advantage of using Spring MVC is what? Getting that servlet, ready-made servlet. Developer need not write any servlet. That is Spring MVC. The main advantage is what? They have provided a dispatcher servlet. It is inbuilt servlet. So developer need not write servlet. ये हमें in the box it has given the dispatcher servlet with all the flow control logic. So developer get rid of the bird from this burden of creating the servlet and managing flow control. So in a Spring Boot, basically why we learn this Spring MVC architecture last class, and still we are talking about that because in a Spring Boot, we are going to learn today, we are going to start today itself. The REST API where we are going to develop will work based on this Spring MVC architecture. That's why we have given so much time to this Spring MVC. Now listen carefully. If we develop a web application according to the MVC architecture manually, we discussed this point already, we need to develop the servlet class and JSP file and all the flow control logic manually. But Spring Framework has provided the Spring Web MVC module to simplify the manual MVC application development, in which Spring MVC module provided a predefined servlet class with predefined flow control logic, that is dispatcher servlet class. I hope till this point everyone is comfortable. Good. Now let's talk about that, how this Spring Boot will come and it has just, you can say that rule over the industry. Now Spring Boot basically, ये Spring Boot है क्या basically? It is a one type of module, or you can say that one type of project in a Spring. It has further simplified your task development. Not only the web application development it has simplified, even the other type of application also it has simplified. So it is basically, it is a Spring platform that mainly focus on convention over configuration. What is the meaning of that? In Spring Boot, they have already assumed that auto-configured, that means most of the important classes, libraries, they are auto-configured. Not only that, they are as configured, you can customize those configuration also. Very much flexible, very much convenient framework. And that's why you can say that's the biggest framework in the Java application development. Biggest framework till date. And it has simplified your all the application development. That means those applications we used to develop last time without a Spring Boot, it took 1 or 2 weeks. With the Spring Boot, within just 1 or 2 days, you can develop this entire application. Everything it has simplified. It is not a framework software. It is just a Spring application development platform, one module of Spring, which provides RAD means rapid application development feature to the Spring software. Very quickly, you can develop the application with the Spring Boot. Spring Boot supports auto configuration. That means lots of configuration for logging, for you can say that unit testing, for you can say that embedded server. A number of configuration is already, it is done. Based on your dependency, just it will automatically detect it, which type of dependency you have added. Based on that, automatically your application will work. So lots of configuration manually doing that, it has reduced the burden. In your revision batch, if I will take one session to show you one manual development of web application. Whatever we are discussing right now, so manually how we used to develop our web application manually without a Spring Boot, that part also I will show you one example. Now, basically, this is Spring Boot. It provides an integrated Tomcat server also. So we can develop the web application, web services without installing the server. That means if you are using the Spring Boot, you need not install the web server or application web server basically manually. If you are not using Spring Boot, if you are just using Spring MVC, then what will happen? It will give you support of dispatcher servlet. But still what you need to do? You need to develop your application. You need to configure this dispatcher servlet. After that, what you need to do? You need to install your server, and in that you need to deploy your application. But Spring Boot, they have given you one predefined web server. Predefined, you can say that embedded Tomcat server. You need not install any server. And believe me, that means using the Spring Boot when it was invented, and with this feature, embedded Tomcat server microservices concept started. We're going to talk about the microservices architecture. In our last session, I will give you an idea. Now, with the help of Spring Boot, we can develop any type of application, like web application, web services, microservices, Spring cloud-based application, desktop application, remoting application. Very easily we can develop. Now let's talk about, to quickly summarize all those things, what are their meaning, right? So Spring, what is the Spring? It is a Java-based application framework. What is a Spring core? Zahid Haider is saying that is Tomcat server like AWS? No, AWS is not a server. Zahid, first of all, AWS is a cloud. You can say that AWS is a cloud provider, which is having lots of services out there, where you can hire a computer, where you can install a server, where you can rent a database. Lots of services you can use. You can store S3 bucket, you can rent S3 bucket. It is not at all a server. It is just a provider, cloud provider. Ayaj is saying Tomcat is like a JSON server. No, it is not like a JSON server. It is a web server, which is having the web container. What is a web container? I have told you already, which is having just a web container, servlet container, which manage your servlet classes, and which will helps us to execute the servlet and JSP type of application, provide the entire infrastructure. And Tomcat is the famously known server. Other servers are also there, like JT server is there, some other n number of web servers are there. But Tomcat is famously known or famously used web server. So Spring, it was just a framework. Spring Core, it is a base module of Spring framework, which provides IOC container and dependency injection mechanism. What is a Spring MVC? It is a Spring module to develop the Java-based web application or web services. WA for web application, WS for web services. To simplify, that means simplify the application development process. Simplify the process by providing, simplify the application development process by providing dispatcher servlet class with predefined flow control logic. And Spring Boot, what it has done, it is a platform which simplifies the Spring application development. It provides integrated Tomcat server, as well as it configures the dispatcher servlet internally. So basically with the Spring Boot, you are going to get two important things. First, that is embedded Tomcat server. You need not install any kind of server to run your application or to execute your web application. Second, that means even you need not configure your dispatcher servlet. In lots of interview, I have seen that those people, they are in the interview, some interviewer, they have asked the question, can I develop a Spring MVC application without using Spring Boot? Without using Spring Boot, how you can develop a web application? In that case, you can tell, sir, we can use Spring MVC. In Spring MVC, the dispatcher servlet is there. What we need to do, we have to configure this servlet inside our application. And then we need to develop our application. We need to install the server, and we need to deploy our application on the server. But if you are using the Spring Boot, even you need not configure. आपको इसको configure करने की भी जरूरत नहीं है. Lots of people, lots of beginners, they even don't know about the dispatcher servlet. What is the internal role of the dispatcher servlet? Dispatcher servlet, you can say, the lead character of your Spring Boot. It will act as a front controller. Whatever request you are passing through the Spring Boot, all the requests will be trapped by the dispatcher servlet. So remember the 2 point of the Spring Boot. First point, it configures the dispatcher servlet. Second, it provides the integrated Tomcat server. And lots of configuration is there. Lots of other configuration are also there. We are going to see that. Now let's quickly create one Spring Boot application and see that which type of Spring Boot application and how we can develop that. So there are various ways to develop the Spring Boot application. The first way, you can either install the STS. This STS, whatever we are using till now. This STS basically it is an Eclipse only. Eclipse is a one famous ID. You can say the universal Java ID, Eclipse, which is having some inbuilt plugin which make you easy to develop a Spring Boot application. STS basically is simple like Eclipse here, but it has already some plugins are there which helps us to develop a Spring Boot application. So directly you can download this STS, which is a Eclipse, and which is Eclipse ID with Spring Boot related plugins. Already some plugins are there. Second approach, what you can do, second approach is you can take your ID, either normal Eclipse you can use, or NetBeans you can use, VS Code you can use, IntelliJ you can use, and there inside that you need to download this STS related plugin. Plugin you can download from their marketplace, and then you can install that. They also work as a STS, and which will simplify to develop a Spring Boot application. The third approach, using Spring Initializer. That means you don't want to install the plugin. You want to use your normal Eclipse or NetBeans or IntelliJ or whatever the ID is there. So you can go to a website, Spring Initializer. That is, there is a one website, Spring.io. There you can go to there and you can develop application. You can choose all the dependency and generate a WAR file or jar file. And that jar file you can unzip, zip file basically. That zip file you can unzip and import that in your STS. This approach also I will show you. The fourth approach is either you can create a Maven or Gradle application, and you can install some of the STS related dependencies. There is another approach is there, using that command line. That means using the terminal also, you can develop the STS application using STS. Using command line also you can develop, you can generate, right? Lokesh is saying STS giving not responding frequently. So I will tell you that if your STS is having some problem, some STS, they are not going to show that the proper intelligence. Let me show you, in fact. Suppose that in your STS, suppose it is not working. So the quick solution is what you can do. You can go to your, let's say that where the STS is installed. So say you can pick any class, and where is your workspace basically, and go to the properties. And this is your workspace, Masai WS, and this is my workspace. So go to that particular workspace. So here it is. Workspace where your application used to be there. Simply you delete this .metadata folder. .metadata folder, it used to cache some of the information that may face, due to that you may face some problem. So simply you need to go to your workspace where you have created the workspace where your all applications are landing. Go to that particular workspace and delete this .metadata and restart your STS. It should resolve your all the problem. Restart your application and relaunch that, update that your project. It should work. Whenever you are facing this type of problem, always try to delete this .metadata from your workspace and restart your STS. Okay. Now let's quickly go through our notes. So here, these are the various which way we are going to use, or most frequently used. The most frequently used approach is this one. If you are using the STS ID, you need not worry about anything. Every plugins are by default, it is there. And if you are using IntelliJ or some other ID, so people use this approach. They develop one type of application skeleton from the Spring Initializer website, and it will be downloaded in a zip file. That zip file you need to unzip and import that in your Eclipse or whatever your IntelliJ, wherever you want, you can import. So this first option and third option, Most frequently used options are there. So let's try to developing a simple Spring application using Spring Boot. I told you already that with using Spring Boot, you can develop a different type of application. For example, not only web application, if you want to develop a simple standalone application, desktop application, that also you can develop. Let me quickly develop one Spring Boot application on STS. I will show you both approaches, Spring Initializer approach as well. So here I'm going to right click here, go to the new, and there's an option you will find that is Spring Starter Project. Click on this. Give the project name. Let's say that I'm giving that Spring Boot App 1 or Spring Boot normal app. And then after, it will be as default location of your workspace. You have to select which type of build tool you are using. Gradle is also very much famous build tool, similar to Maven. Both work in a similar manner. Somebody uses Gradle, somebody uses Maven. Since we are using the Maven, we have to use this one. Vishal is saying deleting the metadata, all existing project is removed. No, Vishal, deleting the dot metadata, it will not delete all the, not remove all the project. Just relaunch your application on the same workspace. If you delete the metadata and if you restart your STS, again the dot metadata folder will be created, but the previous content related all the things will be deleted, which is cached and due to which you are getting or facing the problem. So since we are using the Maven approach or Maven build tool, so I have selected the Maven. And please select here the jar module. We are not going to use the var. Why? Because we are not installing or deploying this application on a different server. Let's say that you want to deploy this application on or after installing a server, let's say application server or web server, on those type of application server you want to deploy, then you can use var, web archive. But we are using .jar. That means jar module. Let it be the jar only, because we are going to use the normal application, normal Java application with embedded Tomcat. Since it is a normal application, not a web application, right now there will be no any concept of server. This is your group ID. I'm giving the group ID. You know that what is the group ID? I'm just using this com.masai. Artifact ID, it is the your application ID name. So same name automatically it is given there. Whatever name I have given here, same name is there. You can change this artifact ID. Version is snapshot version. It indicates that this application is in under development. This is your description. This is your base package. The base package name also I'm giving as com.masai. You can change accordingly. And then click on next. Now here you can select some of the dependencies, which type of application you are creating. So lots of dependencies are there. So like cloud platform related dependencies, IO related dependencies, Spring Batch related dependencies, security related dependency, OAuth related or SQL related dependency. Lots of dependencies are there. But for this application, I'm not going to use any type of dependencies, not selecting that. I'm simply clicking on next, and finish. So I'm trying to create one simple Spring Boot application, normal application without selecting any kind of dependencies. Now see the status bar here below where my cursor is pointing. Until it has completed the finish, don't try to write your application. You should have the proper net connection so that it will going to download all the plugins, all the jar file. First time, it might take some time. Now, since the all dependencies are resolved, your application is skeleton is ready. Remember, I have not selected any dependencies. Just I have created a simple normal Spring Boot application. This is not at all a web application, it's a normal Java standalone application. Now, if you click on this, is it not a Maven project? Yes or no? and it is Java version 17. We need not change the Java version using properties tag. Now let me, whenever you are searching or opening any Java Maven project, the first task is what you should always check the pom.xml. Because this file is a main file, main configuration file. If you open this pom.xml, now see that what type of dependencies are there. So this is a parent tag, this is the parent Spring Boot starter application, which has lots of predefined configuration are there in this application. This is your artifact and the coordinates like group ID, artifact ID, description, all those things. Properties, Java version 17. And see the dependencies is basically having two dependencies. I have not selected any dependencies while creating the application, but by default, it came along with two dependencies. One is a what? Yes, we have not selected. These are the by default. Two dependencies are there in your normal Spring application, Spring Boot application. The first one is the Spring Boot starter. Second one, Spring Boot starter test. This is what they know that whether you are writing any type of application, you might require unit testing. So they have already given that jar file related to the testing and all the related normal application related jar file. So only two dependencies are there. Now let's see that in your Maven dependencies, that means how many jar file shipped with the first application. And remember, I have not selected any dependencies while developing the application. See this Maven dependency, it has bunch of jar files. See this, how many jar files are there. You might say that, sir, what is the requirement of these jar files? Now let's see that here. These are the Spring related jar files: Spring Boot, Spring Bean, Spring AOP, Spring JCL. Then after, this is the logging related log type of, because for each application, logging is also an essential part. You should keep some log messages. So for that one, log4j and logback, some frameworks are the APIs are there. You might require some testing. So for that one, we have Mockito, JUnit, Jupyter. These are the APIs. By using that, you can perform the unit testing. You might require Java to JSON and JSON to Java conversion. For that, we have that Jackson related or JSON related dependencies are there. So these dependencies is the minimum dependencies for any Spring Boot application. After that, next component I want to show you, that is com.main.java. This is that here you will see that base package is com.masai, and in that one application main class is also created by the Spring Boot wizard, which we have to. It has created one application. This application ka naam kya hoga? The same name of your project appended with application.java. And if you open this application, see this, what is there. In this application, simple, we have a main method, public static void main, and which is having one particular statement and one annotation. So we are going to take a small break here. And after the break, we are going to discuss about this annotation and this statement. Is it okay? So Apnil asking what will happen when we run it. We will see that after a break, we are going to discuss about this, what will happen and how this application will work. So let's quickly take that one short break. It is 9:57. This break will be for 5 minutes. So we'll come back by 10:02. Is it okay? Please confirm.
Okay. So we have just now created one simple application using Spring Boot. Already and what are the dependencies we have seen? Bunch of dependencies are also included in your application, and one main class is already created for you. In this main class, we have the main method, and this is your one statement is there. In that statement, basically what is there? There's a one predefined class is there, Spring application, which is having a static method run. And in the run method, it has supplied two parameters. First parameter is your class type, which class type is there, that is your application.class. And second parameter is your command line argument. If you have any command line argument that will be supplied to this run method. Now, what this run method used to do that? Basically, will going to return you the application context. So you can hold that in a application context. And I hope you know that. So Darshan is saying audio is lagging. Is it for everyone? Okay, just give me one sec. Now is it okay? Is it okay now? Or still it is lagging? Hello? Good. Static method is Spring application dot run. It will going to return you the application context. And what is this application context? Give me the answer. Please write that in your chat box. Can anyone tell what is this application context? It is your Spring container. It is your IOC container. And you know that what you need to do. Now, after that, what you can do, let's talk about quickly about this Boot, Spring Boot application annotation. Essentially, this Spring Boot application is a combination of three annotations. It is a combination of three annotations. So what are those annotations? Let me just show you. So it is a combination of these three annotations. And some of the annotation you are already aware with that. The first annotation is the @ configuration. Can you tell me that @ configuration annotation? What is the meaning of this annotation? @configuration. That means it is a configuration class. This class will act as a configuration class. You know that in a Spring annotation approach, we use that instead of writing XML file, we wrote what Spring configuration class. So this configuration annotation indicates that this class will act as your configuration class. Now, there's another annotation is a component scan. And this indicate or activate the scanning from the base package. Now you can say that, sir, where is our base package? The same package in which the class is declared, this same package will act as your base package. That means whatever classes you are going to write inside the same package or any sub package of scom.masai, that will be scanned. But if you are going to write any other classes inside another package, like abc.masai or a1, b1, any package, so those package will not going to get scanned. I hope you are aware with this concept. We have discussed in depth about that this type of package will be scanned. And the base package, you need to remember com.masai, because always lots of students used to complain, sir, our classes, it is saying that some error. What they used to do, they used to write some package like that. They used to create abc.a1. And in this package, they try to create a component or class. And they used to say that our class scan nahi ho raha. Why? Because this is your base package. Now, let's say that if you want to scan some classes inside this package also, suppose you want to put this package also in the radar of your work main package. In that case, you can explicitly tell that container, that is @component scan of your, what is that, masai, comma, com.abc, com.abc.a1. like this. So you can mention that one, how many packages you are going to scan. But if you don't mention this one, remember always that is by default, it is a component scan. Somebody is saying that it will not scan. No, basically COM, it will not able to go to that. You can write that here, component scan explicitly, write that in a base package. You can do some R&D over there. Still some person is complaining. Just 1 week. Actually, I want to switch my network. Let me just try to switch with my network. Just hold for just 2 to 3 seconds. Now I hope my voice is clear. Please confirm. Good. So these two annotation we discussed about that. Now the third annotation is the enable auto configuration. This annotation will tell what lots of configuration are already there in your application, like configuring the dispatcher servlet. Since it is not a web application, so there is no any about the dispatcher servlet. But some other configuration, let's say that if you want to use a JUnit or if you want to use a logging, so those type of configuration. Even I will tell you that there is one other file is there. Like if you go to that SRC main resources, there is a one file is created for you, application.properties. And this file will act as your main configuration file. Recall our last class where we discussed, not last, the which class where we have learned the Spring annotation approach. There we have written one properties file, some key value pair, and we used to read that file in our application. For that one, we have to do some property source annotation and specify that particular source name. So those configuration are also not required here. In your application, yes, by environment object and by @value annotation. So those configuration also not required here. By default, one application.properties will be created for you inside the main resources. Right now it is empty. It does not have any configuration. If you write any configuration, that will automatically will be reflected for your application due to this enable auto configuration. Not only that, any other configuration are also there. So this is the basically this is also very important interviewer question. Interviewer lots of time they used to ask, can you tell me something about this annotation? Should tell that this annotation indicates that this class will work as a configuration class, and it should be started the component scanning from this base package, and it enables our auto configuration mode. I hope till this point everyone is comfortable. So let me remove this one. You can just click on this annotation and you'll be able to see this documentation of this annotation. So see that here it is component scan. This annotation is internally using Spring Boot configuration and enable auto configuration. This documented and target inherited this annotation. Basically, it is a meta information. Okay. Now, so everything is okay. We have understood that this is the main class, which is having some properties and some configuration is there, which has we have not done anything. Just we hold that particular object inside a container. Now, what I'm going to do that here, I'm going to create one class inside this package from.mess. Let me delete this package. Unnecessary was I have com.mess same package, and in this I'm creating a simple class. We say that class is A, and inside this class, I'm going to write public void function inside function. It's a normal Java class, but I want to register this class as a bean, Spring Bean. Now it's your turn. You need to give me the answer. How we can make this Java class as a Spring Bean? Please quickly give me the answer here. By using what? We have various ways. Basically, we can use two ways. The first way is what? We can annotate this class using stereotype annotation. And you know that what are the stereotype annotation? That is either you can use any of service, repository, or controller. And if you're not sure that this class is having which type of logic, So you can simply annotate this class using @component, right? So this class, while auto scanning, it will be registered with the container. Can you guess what will be the ID, default ID of this class? Yes, small a. Now simply what to do, go to your main application. You know that rest of the thing. What you can do here, you can pull the object. Very good, Vishal. So ctx dot get bean and pass this here small, that is your ID, a dot class. Type, and it has given you the bean object, and simply you can call a1 dot function. Now let's run this program, run as Java application, or you can use a Spring Boot app. So what is the difference? It will show that your normal console, it will show some colorful console. So since it is a Spring Boot application, I'm going to use Spring Boot app. And now here you are able to see the output. Now let's quickly go through the second approach. I just removed this stereotype annotation. Now tell me that which other approach we need to use to register this class with the container. No. Ayaj is saying XML. No, I'm not going to use the XML. XML we are not supposed to use in the Spring Boot. Spring Boot strongly says that don't use the XML. Then which approach, Lokesh, you are correct? Yes, Naveen, you are also correct. That means we have to use @bean annotation. So where to write that @bean annotation? We can simply write that in our main class. Because this class is act as a configuration class. You can either create a separate configuration class. That means you can create your another class. We always prefer to write another class like that app config, and this class will act as your configuration, and you need to write a method public a get a object, and here what to do, return new, and simply at the rate, that's it. So this object will be here. If I will pull the object again in the main class itself, here it will, it should work. But here small a, will it going to work? Can you guess the ID of this object? What will be the ID of this object? If I run the program, I should get that some exception. Let me run this program, see that output. See that I'm getting an exception. It is saying that no, we will not find the small a related ID. So basically, yes, Abhishek, yes, Sudarshan, you are correct. So here basically, it should be the ID here. The by default ID will be the get AOB. The method name itself will become the ID. But if I want to give the small a, you can put that in a bracket, small a. Then it will become the ID of this particular bean. So run this application once again, and you will get that proper output. Make sense? So this is the another approach of using this annotation. Now let's say that I'm creating another class. Before creating the class, we can instead we don't require this class also. If you delete this app config class, and let me just delete this app config class before. Let me delete this app config class, and we can write that creating that bean annotation related method inside the main class, because our main class is also as a configuration class. How so? Because we just now seen that this Spring Boot application annotation will is a combination of your what configuration class also. So we can create that bean here itself. That is, we can create a method public a get a object or whatever, and return 0. at the rate. This will also work, right? So in this case, what we need to do? Let's save this one. Is the error? We need to import this B. And this is I need to pass here small. That's it. Now Arshad Ali is saying, sir, can we have the multiple configuration class? That's what I'm trying to say, Arshad. Please focus on this. Now let's run this program. See that here. And it should work also. So that means this class is also acting as a configuration class. And in the previous example, I have created explicitly one another configuration class. It proves that what you can have more than one configuration class. Make sense? So in one configuration class, you can configure all your Spring security related configuration. In one configuration class, you can write your AOP related configuration. In one configuration class, you can write your JDBC and database related configuration. You can have multiple configurations for clear separation. Suppose if you have a very big project. Now, ideally, I have created in the first approach a separate configuration class, and in this approach, I have created this bean object in this main class, which is the best approach. The best approach is what create explicitly separate configuration class. Don't pollute your main class. Let it be the main class will be as it is. For any extra configuration, you can put that, create that a separate configuration class, annotate with at the rate configuration, and create a separate, that is all your bean creation or whatever the other configuration you want, you can use that. No, Sudarshan, it will not make any sense on that. So you should create that a separate configuration class if you want to externalize the logic, and don't pollute your main class for your normal application. Is it okay? Please confirm. Now, what I'm going to do that, let's say that I want to create another class called B. And in this class, I'm just defining only one method, public void function B. And inside this, I'm writing this only one statement. Inside function B of B. Now I want to use this class. First of all, I need to register this class with the container, right? So we can use at the rate component, or we can also write a bean with annotation also. And now in this class A, I want to utilize this B class as a dependency. So I can take private B1. And this B1 method, I want to call their method from here. B1 dot fun. So this A class will act as a dependent class, B class is acting as a dependency class. But I want to resolve this dependency. I want to inject this one. Can you guess what we need to do here? How to wire this one? How to wire this one? We have different approach. If this dependency is optional, we can use setter injection. Setter injection. So what you can do at the rate auto wire. In this case, automatically container will create a setter method for you, and it will populate that object. It will try to search this B object is there registered with the container or not. Yes, this object is registered. So here, this object will be injected. This is internally using what setter injection. Inject the value. That's it. Now, if we quickly pull this object using a small a and call this method, it has given some exception. No qualifier, no, we don't require any qualifier. See that which type of exception is coming. It is saying that no being named with a qualifier available. Why like this? Because, of course, the reason is this class A, I just removed this annotation. Class A is not at all a string B. So what we need to do that? At the rate, you can use at the rate service or at the rate component. So component also you can use, service also you can use. So this class A is your service layer class, which is having a dependency of B, and it will going to get auto wired. Let's run this application once again. See the output. This time it will work. So this is your what setter injection. But I want to make it as constructor injection. Then what I need to do? Hmm, This annotation we need to remove it from here, and we need to take a parameterized constructor. And this is your constructor injection. What we need to do here? I can use at the rate auto wire on a top of constructor. So while object is created by the container for A, constructor will be executed and the value of B will be auto wire. This will also work in the same manner. So let's quickly for this example. Makes sense? Not only this, you can from a class, you can even remove this auto wired also. Because in the latest version of Spring Boot, whenever you are telling the container, hey container, create this object as a Spring Bean, while creating the object, it will going to execute the constructor or constructor में कोई dependency है, तो container will automatically inject this object. Automatically auto wired. In previous version of Spring Boot, here auto wired was mandatory to tell that constructor injection, but in latest version it is optional. Only for constructor injection, not for setter injection. So I'm just making it simple. I'm using at the rate auto wired. So remember this one will going to use as what? Setter injection. Am I clear? Please confirm. Setter injection, constructor injection, both we have seen. Please respond here. Okay. Now the next thing is that let's say that I have used setter injection, but can I define my own setter method also? Yes. And there also we can apply this at the rate auto wire. You know the difference. So defining your own setter method, you have much more control over that setter method, in which you can define some other statement as well. Now this is another important point. Let's say that here B object I have auto wired and B object is there here. Now in the main class, I'm defining one method. Let's say that at the rate or public B get B object. Return new B. And here I have applied at the rate B notation. So here B object will be returned. This B object. And one another B object is there with the component stereotype annotation. Now this A object is required in one auto wired. What will happen? Give the answer. If I try to run this example. If I will run this example, what will happen? It will give you the ambiguity problem, right? So if I try to run this main class, it will throw an exception by raising the ambiguity problem, right? So if you notice this problem here, that is failed B1 for A required a single bean, but we found two bean. And how you can resolve? You have various ways, you know that. You can use primary, you can use what is that qualifier? We can change that particular ID. In number of solutions are there, you know that better. If you set auto word on the top of variable and then wrote that a setter method, then container will use this same setter method which I created, or still it is use its own setter method. No, you are saying that if you control, let me just first conclude this, then after I will come back to you. So basically here, if I use this B object, so this time we get the problem, we know that, but here I'm going to use at the rate primary. Then there will be no ambiguity and this object will get registered. Now Prince Kumar is saying that, let's say that suppose this object is there, or iske baad we know that setter method will be given by the container. But what will happen if I will define my own setter method? also. So generate the setter method. Generate. To prove that this setter method is working or not, I'm going to put one statement as well inside the setter method, right? So inside our setter method, let's see that it is going to use our setter method or not to execute our application. So what is the meaning of that? Is it using our setter method to inject this B object? Please confirm. Is it using our setter method to set the value? No. But let me cut it from here and paste it here. Now let's run the program quickly. Now inside our setter method, it got executed. But let me just verify once again. If I just remove this from here and paste it over here, run this program. Got it? Vishal is saying at the rate primary is violated. No, primary is violated where primary is working. This object is working properly, right? Good. So this is the setter method and the auto wiring, and now we have just created. So you can think like that. If you have a normal desktop application, you can create so many bean, so many classes, and if you need one object in another application, inside another one, you can make use of dependency injection facility. You can write your business logic and you can develop a normal application, normal Spring application, right? I hope everyone is comfortable with this developing Spring application, normal Spring application, simple Spring Boot using Spring Boot. Now, before talking about the REST API, let's talk about this web services. Then after we are going to start that Spring Boot to develop a REST API. So web services, just like that, we have seen that architecture of web application. Now it is a similar type of, we have already took that enough information about the web services, but let's see that some in depth about this web services much more detail. We discussed about the web application. Always remember web application, web services, kya difference hai? The main difference is what? First difference, web application give you the entire dynamic HTML, which is not new. Let's talk about that in fact. A service that can be accessed over the web, that is called a web services. Basically, you can say API service, which service you want to expose. Now, web application is also accessed over the web, but what are the difference? Whatever the web application is there, that is also used to be accessed by the web only. But what is the main difference? We have these three differences are there. First, let's see that web application are meant for end user and to be accessed by the browser in human readable form. So typical web application, whenever it is created, you need to keep in your mind that is who will be the client. And for a typical web application, the client will be the end user. Directly, they need that HTML browser. That means all the GUI in the HTML format. That means this should be in a human readable form. But if you are using the web services, so web services are meant for application to access the raw data from the JSON or in the form of JSON, plain text, XML, etc. Which indicates that what web services ke jo client honge na, the client will be the other type of application. They are not in the human readable form. They are not for the normal end user. Always web services will be called by the other type of application. Whereas web application client will be the browser in a human readable form. But for web services, the other applications are which type of application? The application could be the React application, could be the Angular application, could be the microservices, could be the any other application developed in any other language. They just need your raw data in a JSON form or XML form. And they can use this data, they can embed this data, and they can develop their own GUI. For example, you might have booked the ticket for a particular airline. So you have the two options. Let's say that I want to book a ticket for Air India, right? So we have two options. First option is what? You can go to the official website of Air India and you can book the ticket. So they have basically a web application. So if you open the Air India website, there will be a web application. That page will come in a GUI format, human readable format. So everyone can understand and they can book the ticket. But you can book a ticket from Yatra or Make My Trip also. Na? Let's say that I'm taking booking a ticket from Yatra. Also, you can book the ticket. So this Yatra is a different application. So this Yatra application, they just you enter that source, destination, and the travel date. And what will happen? Your Yatra will fire an API request, one web service call to the Air India. So Air India will have what? The web application which is directly used by what? End user. And Air India is having what? Web services also. Is having web services also. This web services return the JSON data. And this web services will be used by which application? Other application. That is your Yatra. Yatra using the web services. Whereas web application directly meant for the client, but web services it will just send the data. That means which flights are there. Now Yatra.com, what they can do, Yatra.com, they can add some promo, some offer code, and some advertisement, lots of things, lots of the stuff they can put on their website. So Yatra internally will call one API, that is web services call to the Air India, and they will say that, hey, Air India, I don't need your end user, that means your web application. I have the different application which needs just your data. Please provide me your data. I will give that. I will give my presentation. So many companies like Booking.com, GoIbigo, MakeMyTrip, Travel.com, lots of travel companies are there. They just what? Call a API to the Air India and they used to tell, hey, I'm not your normal end user, so don't provide me the web application. Give me the web service. Give service, and in this web service, just provide me the your normal data, and that data I will make that my GUI. I can embed that in my application. Just like that, Google Map API or Google Earth API, lots of like weather API, you can call and you can get the data. You can present the data in your way. Make sense? This is the first difference. Second difference is what? A web application can access to the web service to get some data to or to perform some task, whereas web services cannot access the web application to get some data. So web application can access the web services. That means your, let's say that this one, I talked about this example. Yatra is having their own web application is also there, right? So Yatra web application, they can utilize the web services given by Air India, right? So same thing I'm trying to see here. So that is a web application, that is this Yatra web application, can access the web services to get some data or to perform some task. Whereas web services cannot access the web application because what? Web applications are not meant for reusability. Now, a single web services can be used by different kind of application, right? Different kind of application can use that. Let's say that Google Map is there, Google Map API. It can be used by the different other application. They can call the REST API call and they will get the data. And those applications developed in any technology. It's not like that ki Air India is developed in Java, so Yatra.com also need to be developed in Java. No, it's not like that. Yatra, they can use the ASP.NET or Yatra might have used Python or some other language. So just call that REST services or the API and they can embed the data. So it makes our this web services make our application communication as a language and platform independent form. Language or and platform independent as well. So these are what the key differences between web services and web application. I hope everyone is comfortable. Please confirm. I hope you are comfortable with this three differences. Respond here. Am I audible? Hello. Is it lagging? Give me one sec. Now is it okay? Hello. Okay. So these are the differences between web services and web application. Now, web services basically service was nowadays directly people start getting this API, but you should have knowledge about the web services because they're important. So web services are also categorized in two categories. One is a SOAP-based web services, and another is a RESTful web services. I don't know what's the problem is happening here. Let me just check out that. Now is it okay? Please confirm. Hello. Is my voice okay now? Okay. Network issue here, but I hope it is clear now. Good. So listen, web services categorized in category. One is a SOAP-based web service, another is a RESTful web service. So web service means generating the raw data. So in initial days or already, what is there? We have the SOAP-based web services. So earlier we used to create a web services. That means two applications try to connect with each other, like Air India try to connect with Yatra. So they used to follow the SOAP-based protocol or SOAP-based web service. But this is the latest one, modern one, RESTful web services. And nowadays, people preferring this RESTful web services over the SOAP. In our earlier days, when I started to learn the web services, that time I have learned this SOAP-based web services. It was quite challenging that time because it is a heavy weight and it's a very complex process to develop this type of application. Now, what was the problem with this SOAP-based web services? Have a just quickly look on into that because in lots of interviewer, not only interview, lots of companies also. If you join the company, na, some people they just use because my lots of fresher students they used to tell me, "Yes, sir, we have learned and we have practiced on the RESTful web services, but my companies are still using the SOAP-based web services." So I used to share my own notes with them, so they feel very much comfortable. So you should have the idea, or not only that, you should have just good knowledge about this SOAP-based web services. I will try to give you some of the notes of the SOAP-based web services in your revision batch. But here you should have at least idea कि SOAP-based web services होता क्या है. So SOAP-based web services, so full form is Simple Object Access Protocol. Basically, it is an XML-based protocol to communicate between client application and server application. For example, in this approach, Air India and Yatra communication, which application will act as a client, which application? For which application? Can you tell me that? Which application will act as a client for another application? Yatra is a client of Air India. Why? Because Yatra is accessing the data of Air India. So in initial days, Yatra have to use SOAP-based web services, XML XML-based request call to the Air India. And Air India used to provide the data in XML format. That is the basically the SOAP-based service. So communication between the client application and server application, it's used to happen through the XML-based protocol. Since XML-based protocol, it is also platform and language independent. Here also, Yatra might have used, let's say that it has used .NET and Air India might have used what Java, then there is no problem. They can try to communicate because they are communicating using XML. But basically, the problem is to develop this XML-based communication. First of all, we need to create one WSDL file. What is this WSDL file? WSDL file. It was a main component in your SOAP-based protocol. Basically, it is a XML file in which we describe all the services which we expose to the client. That means client need to, let's say that client need your data. Now client, how the client will make the request? What are the parameters he will pass? What are the responses he is going to get? Entire detail about that particular request call we need to expose in this WSDL file. It was quite heavy, you can say that, or quite complex file. And that file need to send to the client. And using that file itself, the client will make a call to your service. So let's say that Yatra try to connect with your uh, Air India. So Yatra has to get the WSDL file of Air India. And using that particular file, they can make a call on that. Creating a web services using SOAP are heavyweight applications because apart from creating the web service classes, that is actual service, there is a need to create some extra binding classes to pass the XML. Whatever data is there, you need to pass this XML and to get the data and convert them in a Java object and vice versa. And moreover, to expose and consume the web services, we need to generate some XML file, WSDL file, which is little complex file. कहने का मतलब है कि this file creation, the SOAP-based services to be used, it is a complex approach to make a call of REST or to make a web services call. Now, in order to make the web services a lightweight, another architectural style is defined as a REST. एक और तरीका define किया गया REST. REST full form is representational state transfer. Now, this REST architecture style tell that create a web service with required operation, whatever service you want to expose, first create them with required functionalities and operation and expose them through the HTTP protocol. They used to say that don't use SOAP, don't use XML. You need not write any WSDL file. What you can do, define your service and expose that service through the HTTP protocol and allow them to access by the client with the help of HTTP protocol without any kind of extra binding class or any XML file. So now, previously, when your let's say that Yatra try to communicate with Air India, so Air India has to develop the application. Air India has to develop the WSDL file. Air India has to develop lots of configuration file like parser of XML and all those things. Now Yatra has to download the WSDL. Yatra it has to create some classes, some a number of XML they need to generate, and then only this call used to happen. But RESTful web services used to say that Air India just create your web service or create your functionalities and expose them through the HTTP protocol. Hey client, if you need that call, this data, just send a request using HTTP. You don't need any kind of WSDL, don't need any kind of other stuff. So mainly what your, in order to make that means here, the REST architecture style, tell that what required functionality, please create that and expose them through the HTTP protocol and allow them to be accessed by the client with the help of HTTP protocol without any extra binding classes or any XML file. Now, based on this architectural style, Sun Microsystem has released one JAX RS API. JAX RS API is a part of your what J2W. JAX RS API. It is a part of J2EE specification for creating and consuming the RESTful web services. How the client will call this web service, how the server will provide this service or expose this service. So Sun Microsystem has released one JAX RS API. And previously, not only previously, nowadays also without a Spring Boot, if you want to create a web service, you have to use this API. This is a part of your J2EE. Now, this JAX RS API has different implementation. Just like that, your JP is having the implementation as Hibernate. Similarly, JAX RS API having the implementation, other implementation, in number of implementations are there, like Jersey, REST Easy. These are the implementation framework of JAX RS API. What this implementation used to provide, you have to download this Jersey or REST Easy related jar file. They will provide all the library, classes or interfaces, methods. Using that, server application can expose their service and client application can consume their service. You can use either Jersey or use a REST. Now, Spring Boot ने क्या किया? Spring Boot क्योंकि सारे काम को simplify कर रखा है. So Spring Boot, what it has done, they have given the implementation of JAX RS API. जैसे ये दोनों third party कंपनियों ने इसे implement कर रखा है. Spring Boot also has implemented JAX RS API in such a way that इतना आसानी से इसे implement कर रखा है कि what we can do with this implementation, we can make controller annotated bean class as a RESTful web service. Controller annotation, you have already know that it is one of the stereotype annotation. Excuse me. So controller annotation is the one type of stereotype annotation. Using this annotation, what you can do, you can create any of the web full REST services very easily. You need not use this type of implementation because it is already implemented and it has made that everything simplified. Now, what are the rules to make a Java class as a RESTful web service? If you are using this Jersey or REST Easy, JAX RS API and its implementation, if you are using Jersey or REST Easy, you are not using Spring Boot. So in RESTful web services, web service class is called as a root resource. मतलब जिस क्लास के अंदर आप मेथड लिखोगे RESTful web service बनाने के लिए, उस क्लास को हम रूट रिसोर्स कहते हैं. और उसके अंदर जो आप मेथड लिख रहे हो, जो सर्विसेज को आप एक्सपोज कर रहे हो, that services are called as a resource. So class will be called as a root resource and their functionality and service which we want to expose is known as what? Resource. So one root resource can have multiple resources. The meaning is that एक वेब सर्विस क्लास के अंदर बहुत सारे वेब सर्विस मेथड हो सकते हैं. अब ये जितने भी मेथड होंगे, जितनी भी सर्विसेज होंगे जिन्हें हम रिसोर्स कह रहे हैं, so these resource should have what? Contain one addressable URI. उनके लिए एक प्रॉपर URI होनी चाहिए जिससे कि वो सर्विस और मेथड को हम एक्सेस कर पाए और क्लाइंट कैन एक्सेस that can be accessed by the HTTP protocol. और उस URI को हम कैसे एक्सेस करें? By using HTTP protocol very easily. This is the first rule of creating any RESTful web services. Now, while exposing the RESTful web services, we need to take the support of HTTP protocol method. We have already discussed about HTTP protocol method like get, post, put, delete. So we have to make use of those methods. और किस situation में कौन सा method use करना है? It's very simple. Get method, if you want to create a service which returns some data or information. Let's say that I want to get the customer information, product information, based on their ID, based on their product ID, based on the customer name. So those type of information, if you access that using get, you have to use the get method. But if you want to work except writing a particular service जहाँ पे आप किसी data को accept कर दे, you are expecting some data in which you are just let's say that you are storing, somebody is trying to store a particular information. defining a method which will expecting some data from method. If you want to update some existing, you can utilize the put method. Again, it is lagging. Okay. Here now is it okay? I have just stopped the sharing, but I hope my voice is clear. What we will do that we will take a small break for now. So let me share my screen. I will repeat this point once again. So here we will take a small break. Yes, we will. I will repeat that one. Please don't worry. But we will resume our session by 11 a.m. 11 p.m. So 5 to 6 minutes. Let's have a break, and then after, meanwhile, I will try to fix my network issue also. So once it will be fixed, we will resume the session by 11 p.m. and I will repeat this point once again. Is it okay?
Okay, welcome back. I hope this time my voice is clear. Please confirm. Good. So basically, RESTful वेब सर्विस बनाने के जो तरीका है, उसमें 3 चीजें आपको याद रखना है. First thing is what? That is, जिस क्लास के अंदर हम अपना हम एपीआई बना रहे हैं या सर्विस को एक्सपोज कर रहे हैं, उसे रूट रिसोर्स कहते हैं, और हर मेथड को हम रिसोर्स कहते हैं. और उस मेथड के उस रिसोर्स के एक एड्रेसेबल यूआरआई होनी चाहिए, जिससे कि क्लाइंट उस सर्विस को एक्सेस कर ले. सर्विस का मतलब एक मेथड जिसके अंदर आपको सर्विस को आप एक्सपोज कर रहे हो. अब उस सर्विस बनाने की भी उन्होंने कुछ गाइडलाइन दे रखे हैं रेस्टफुल वेब सर्विस बनाने के. वो क्या कि आपकी सर्विस किस तरह की है. आप उस सर्विस से किसी डेटा को आप एक्सेस करना चाहते हो, then please use the get method. HTTP के get method, by using that you are going to get some information. Or if you are writing if you are a consumer, let's say that if you are a API developer and using that API or using that particular service, you want to send some information, expose some service, or get some data, send some data. That time we have to use get method. But if you want to getting or expecting some data from client, let's say that I'm creating one service which will going to get some data, right? Let's say that if client is trying to store his information, or client is trying to register himself, then we should use that post method. Put method, if the client is trying to do some updation, you have developed one API or application or a particular method. Using that method, you are trying to update the existing data. In that case, make use of put method. And delete method, that means we want to delete some data from your server side. So the client will call that method using delete method, and he can delete some of the existing resources. So these are what for CRUD operation, you can say that. This is for select, if the client is trying to perform select operation to get some data. This is for insert, client is trying to insert some data in your API. This is for update, if client trying to update some data. And this is for delete, if client is trying to delete some data. So these are the guidelines to develop a RESTful web services. Now, every RESTful web service class must be public. This is the next class, because remember that class object will going to create your container, and container will not even locate that class if that class is not a public. The visibility of the class must be public. Now the web service method, I guess it is the lagging or only for a bit, for 1 or 2 seconds, not. Am I correct? Is it still lagging? Please confirm. Okay. Now, should consume format. The REST API have given
rule to develop a RESTful web service. That is whatever the method you are creating to consume the data or let me just try once again.
Data we are consuming. Okay, whatever data we are consuming or we are returning, the data should be in a following format. Which format? The data should be in text/plain format, or application/XML format, or application/JSON format. So that means basically in a JSON form or plain format or XML format, any format you can utilize to send some to either consume the data or to return the data, right? So these are the guided, and which is the most appropriate approach, that is the mostly used approach is JSON approach. Just give me one second. Okay, so this is the mostly used approach. In other, we need to convert, Vishal is saying. Vishal, basically these are the guideline to generate or consume the data. And these are what some default type of approach. We are going to see that in a practical example, how we can generate this type of data. Now, to make use of Java classes as RESTful web service, we need to use Jax RS API and one of its implementation, either Jersey or STZ, outside the Spring environment. That is, if you are not using the Spring framework, if you are using that normal approach, then you have to use this Jax RS API and you have to use this Jersey and REST-easy implementation. This is also one of the important interviewer question people used to ask. Let's say that interviewer used to ask, let's say that I want to create a REST API and I don't want to use the Spring Boot. Do you know that how we can develop? You should have the idea about, you can say, sir, if you are not using the Spring framework, but still we can create a RESTful web service. How? We can use the Jax RS API and its implementation, either Jersey or REST-easy. By using that, we can create our RESTful web service also outside the Spring environment. But the Spring framework has provided a way, provided its own API with implementation to make a Spring Bean. Make a Spring Bean जो controller annotation से annotate होता है, or controller class, which is annotated with controller annotation as a RESTful web service class. Now, Spring MVC provided a dispatcher servlet. We have already seen that with a predefined servlet with all the configuration logic, but without a Spring Boot, if you try to create a Spring MVC project, then developer need to configure this dispatcher servlet class, then install their server and deploy their application to the server manually. But with Spring Boot, dispatcher servlet is already configured as a front controller. What is the meaning of front controller? Just now we are going to see that of our application. Furthermore, Spring Boot also provided integrated Tomcat server to deploy our application. Now, before talking about steps to develop a Spring Boot application, let's quickly show you that the final architecture of Spring Boot application, how the Spring Boot application will look like. Okay, so Spring Boot application, let me just draw the diagram of Spring Boot application. So this is your server. where your application will be deployed. And this is your what client. Now, client here in this application, since it is a web service, not a web application. So this is your server where your application will going to get deployed. So you can use web server जहाँ पे आपका application deploy होगा. And you know that enter that we have the container. And this is your client. Client is a browser software. Here, since it is a web service, so client could be a browser, client could be a Postman, client could be a RESTful web services, client could be anything. We have seen that. What are the client aid if it is a web application? What are the client for if it is a web service? So I'm just writing here client. It could be anything. Now, if you will give the request, the client will give the request. So which type of request he will release or fire? HTTP request, right? So it will going to give the HTTP request for a particular request. So HTTP request. Now this request will come where? This request, let's say that he has given a request for add a particular student or to get the students, right? So let's say that he has or client has fired one request to get me the all API of the student like HTTP colon / application name colon whatever the port number, but ideally the API URI name is the students. Get me the all the student details. So this is a request client has sent, right? So for that particular request, what will happen? There is a one front controller will be there. There will be a front controller. Can you guess which component will act as a front controller here? Please guess here. It is your what servlet. Which servlet? It is a since it is a Spring Boot application, it is a dispatcher servlet. You need not develop this servlet. It is already pre-configured all the flow control logic, which make this class as a or this servlet as a front controller. Now what it will do that it will going to take the help of helper controller. So there is another component will be here. This is your helper controller. Helper controller class. And this class is annotated with which annotation? It will be annotated with @controller or @REST controller annotation. This class will be annotated with so annotated with either controller or REST controller annotation, right? Annotated so controller or REST controller annotated class. REST controller annotated class is there. Okay, this class is having what? This class is having lots of request handler method. This class is having lots of, it contains various request handler methods annotated with @request mapping @request mapping annotation, right? So basically this class will going to contain, and this is your helper controller class. So what will happen? This request will come initially. This request will be taken by the dispatcher servlet. It will take that URI and it will check it. It will take the help of REST controller check कि hey इस URI को map किया हुआ कौन सा request handler method है आपके पास. So that request will go to that appropriate method. That method will be executed, and before executing, what will do? It will going to talk to the service layer class. This is your service layer class. So you can say that here It is at the rate service annotation annotated which class? Service layer class. So your helper controller will going to help take the help from this service annotated service layer class. This service layer class will going to talk to which class? Guess here. That is data access layer class. Data access layer class में हम कौन सा annotation लगाए यहाँ पे? Which annotation should be there? Data access layer class should have which annotation? At the rate repository. Repository annotation class. And this is your what? Data access layer class. Data access layer component. So service layer classes will going to talk to the data access layer class. Data access layer class, you know that it will going to talk to your database. It is your database. This is your final Spring Boot application, how it will going to work. You have to just redraw this diagram in your memory so that what will happen, you will get the entire flow. You will never forget that how exactly will work, because most of the student, they used to remember this helper controller class and the service repository, but they forget the main important component, which is the dispatcher servlet. Make sense? The responses will come, and then from database, the response will come to the data access layer. The data access layer will forward the data to the service layer where business logic will be executed. The service layer data will forward to the controller, and this controller will take the data and forward it to the dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet will, just since it is the raw data, it does not require any JSP or any view. This data will be directly given to the client as a HTTP response. If we save this diagram, so I'm saving this one as a Spring Boot architecture. And our entire application will follow the same architecture, whatever we are going to develop. Yes, Prince Kumar is saying, sir, we will only make helper controller class here. Yes, Prince, since dispatcher servlet is already pre-created, pre-configured, आपको बनाने की भी जरूरत नहीं है, configure करने की भी जरूरत नहीं है. So you are going to just create rest of the components like helper controller, service layer, repository layer. That's it. So which makes our what life much more easy. No need to take the headache of creating a servlet, no need to configure this servlet, no need to write the XML, nothing. So let's quickly create one simple application, because till now we just discussing the theory part only. So steps to develop the Spring Boot RESTful web services. What are the steps? Step 1, develop a new Spring starter project. So I'm going to create a simple project. This time application name I'm giving as Spring Boot REST app 1. Remaining coordinates will be as similar like this. Here I am going to add few dependencies. Now this time I'm just going to add only one dependency. What are these? Just type the web, and you are going to get the dependency as Spring Web. Select the Spring Web dependency. जैसे इस dependency को हमने select किया यहाँ पे, it will be selected here. And guess what? With this dependency, we are going to get two important components. आपको दो चीजें मिलेंगी. पहला क्या? First thing, that is dispatcher servlet, auto configure dispatcher servlet, जो कि पहले वाले एग्जांपल में नहीं था, because वो normal application. And second thing, embedded Tomcat server. These two things you are going to get as soon as you are selecting this Spring Web dependency. Click on next, click on finish. So step 1, create a new Spring starter project and add the Spring Web dependencies from next screen. Note, With this dependency, will integrate embedded Tomcat server plus predefined auto-configured dispatcher servlet class. Make sense? Prince Kumar is asking, sir, we will only, that is there, where also Jersey. No, Jersey API is also here, it is not used. They have internally used it. Spring Boot, it has used their Jersey and some other library internally. It has given one abstraction layer over that. Got it? It has given the abstraction layer over that. That means it internally used what Jersey and other things. So internally used. But the most important component, what you are going to get, जैसे ही आप Spring Web select करते हो, it will going to get you the integrated embedded Tomcat server and predefined auto-configure dispatcher servlet. Am I clear? Please confirm. Hello? Good. Now here is the REST app. If you just open this, see that here the first form.xml, and in this you will notice Spring Boot starter web. पहले वाले प्रोजेक्ट में क्या था? Spring Boot starter web नहीं थी, but now Spring Boot starter web and nothing more than that. This is for unit test. Let's quickly see that how many dependencies are there. So you will notice few more dependencies like Jackson. Then after you will see that embedded Tomcat server, and Spring MVC, Web MVC also. In this Spring and Web MVC, you will find that dispatcher servlet would be there inside this. You can search the core package, and this is your Tomcat embedded server. You're going to get those many dependencies. Now let's see that your application other component. So if you explore that SRC main Java com.mesi is there. And in this, the main class we already discussed about this one earlier, same similar way. That is, it is having a main method and it is annotated with Spring Boot application. Okay, now listen, this time we need not take that application context container and do anything. Why? Because it is not a standalone application. This time this application should be deployed in an embedded Tomcat server. और इस बार ये application को run कौन करेगा? हमारा server, right? So for that one, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create one component, one class. The class name I'm giving as what? Let's say that my controller. This class I'm going to make as a RESTful web service. So first of all, this class making as a controller, I'm giving here @controller annotation. So this class will act as the controller. And here I am defining one method, public string welcome or say hello. A normal string method, and it will simply return welcome to Spring Boot. So this class will act as a root resource or web service class, and this is called your resource method. And I told that each resource should have an accessible URI. How we are going to provide the URI? That URI should be in this format: request mapping. Request mapping, and here you need to provide one URI. I'm giving hello. That's it. So this is called your resource, which should have one addressable URI, and this is called your root resource. And guess what? My application is almost done. Now I need to just relaunch. I need to restart my application. Actually, I need to start my application. How to start the Spring Boot application? You need to pick the main class, जहाँ पे आपका main method पड़ा हुआ है. Pick this main class. Right click. Run as. Here, don't use run as Java application. You have to use a Spring Boot app. As soon as you'll run this Spring Boot app, what will happen? This application will be combined, or it will be internally going to deploy, build and deploy on the internal embedded Tomcat server. And that server will be started automatically. Now you see the log message here. You will notice the log message, that is Your application got started. Tomcat server port started as 8080 in those many milliseconds. That means my application is up and running. So again, I'm repeating, just pick the main class, right click and run as Spring Boot app. Internally, your application will be built and internally it will be deployed in an internal Tomcat server. जो embedded Tomcat server है वहाँ पे application deploy हो जाएगा. So don't take that here application context and pull the object and call the method. Don't use that approach because it is not at all a standalone application. It is a web application. Make sense? Please confirm. Hello. Now let's try to quickly access this endpoint, whether we are able to access this endpoint or not. So how access this URI, HTTP, and then localhost and colon 8080. This is my port number slash hello. I'm trying to access my endpoint. Copy this. And here, this endpoint, I'm trying to call. Okay, I'm putting that in a correct. Alok Kumar is saying that means we will make controller class for a Tomcat. We are just creating a RESTful web service. And this is the one URI. Using that, you can access this service. Right? Client can access this service. So this is the way to call this URI. You need to call HTTP :// localhost. मतलब ये सर्वर कहाँ पे रन हो रहा है और किस पोर्ट पे रन कर रहा है. By default, Tomcat server started on 8080 port. और इस सर्वर पे जो API है वो /hello है. That means this is your URI. So this request will come and it will be taken care by which component? किस component के पास ये request आएगी? जैसे ही client ये request hit करेगा, this will come to which component? Your front controller. That is your dispatcher servlet will take the request. And it will just extract this URI from your URL. आपके URL में से ये URI निकाल दिया जाएगा. And then dispatcher servlet will talk to the helper controller. Hey helper controller, do you have any request handler method which is annotated with hello? Helper controller will say, yes, I have. Now, please execute that method. This method will be executed and this response, whatever you are returning, it will go to the controller. Dispatcher servlet will give the response to the client, right? So if we don't want to use localhost, then can we use another server also? Please, basically localhost will indicate that is your server IP address. But if you deployed your application on AWS or any cloud platform, then instead of localhost, you need to provide that particular AWS related endpoint. Make sense? Please confirm. So my application is up and running. AWS related thing we are going to discuss little later. That means hopefully in our revision batch. Right now, please deploy your application on localhost. We have to use here. Now I'm opening the Chrome here and I'm giving this request HTTP localhost 8080. If I give the request here right now, I'm going to get a white label error. Let's see this here, white label error page, and it is saying that not found. Why like this? Why this error is coming? See, in the console, I'm not getting any exception, but client is not able to see the output. Why? Because ideally, this application, let me check that in your notes. Ideally, your application will be treated as what? Normally, we in fact write this point here because it is not treated. Yeah, here it is. By default, return value from request mapping annotated method will be treated as logical name of physical JSP view related file. मतलब ये जो हमारा स्प्रिंग बूट का एप्लीकेशन है ना, ये बाय डिफॉल्ट स्प्रिंग वेब एमवीसी के लिए बनाया गया था. मतलब सिंपली वेब एप्लीकेशन के लिए बनाया गया था. Spring Boot initially it was created for to developing a web application. And whatever the value you are returning, it was used to be taken care by like that. It was treated as what your HTML page name, your HTML page name, or you can say that your view name, your JSP name. For example, if I instead of this one, I'm giving here what index, or let's say that uh, index.html. I have given this name. So internally, this page should be there. It is taken a logical name of physical page. A physical page कहाँ बनाएंगे? We can develop that physical page in our resources. There's even a static folder is there. Here we can put all our static page. So new, and we can create one HTML file here, index, let's say that HTML file, and I'm giving the name as index.html. So this is my HTML, and I'm giving some BG color of this HTML. Let's say that I'm giving pink and one heading. Welcome to Spring. That's it. Now I need to restart my application. So how to restart the Spring Boot application? My application is still up and running. You can see this red button. If I forget to stop the server and try to run the application once again, see this again, I'm picking the main class, और इसे हमने फिर से अगर run किया Spring Boot application, you will notice you will get an exception in the console. See this? It will throw an exception. It is saying that कि sir आपकी 8080 port पे already एक application run कर रही है. See that port 8080 was already in use. So I cannot run the same application on the same port. Please change the port, or you can restart that, stop that application and restart the application. So stop the server by clicking this red button. And what to do? You need to just relaunch this application once again. Spring Boot app. This it will take another 5 to 6 minutes, and I will conclude the session. Now my application got started, and now if I give the request once again, that is /hello, and you will notice we are able to see that HTML. That is, this is a web application. It is not your web service. It is your what? Web application. Am I clear? Please confirm. Now, if you need that your JSP page name, dynamic web page, so instead of returning this HTML, you have to return the name of your JSP file, and that JSP you can keep somewhere else, right? But I'm saying that no, it is not a web application. Whatever value it is returning, don't return as the name of your JSP or HTML file. Instead of return that as a normal data. In that case, we have two options. The first option, what to do, I'm going to tell, hey, give me the response as a response body. हमें आप इसका नाम मत दो कि ये पेज हमारा, it should not be treated as logical name of your physical JSP or HTML. So by default, return value of request annotated method will be treated as what? Logical name of physical JSP or view related file. मतलब HTML या JSP के फाइल नेम को रिप्रेजेंट करता है. बट हम चाहते हैं कि ये स्प्रिंग बूट जो रिटर्न वैल्यू हो वो डेटा की तरह यूज हो. देन वी नीड टू यूज रिस्पांस बॉडी एनोटेशन. आई एम सेइंग दैट कि रिस्पांस में आप इसकी बॉडी में ये भेजो डेटा में. दैट्स इट. लेट मी स्टॉप द सर्वर and relaunch the application once again. And at this case, you'll able to see if I'm hitting the same request, this time I'm getting the normal data. This time it is your web service. I hope you got the difference between web application and web service. Just हमने एक annotation यहाँ पे लगाया response body. Now what I'm going to do that this controller class, I can write some method which may work as a web service as well, web application. For example, I'm giving hello2. This method name is hello2, and this is returning what? Index.html. And here I'm removing this response body. So if somebody will call slash hello, then it will work as what? Web services. Somebody will call hello to, it will work as a web application. Am I clear? Please confirm. Shubham is saying, sir, please show one JSP. I will show you. I will show you tomorrow's session because we don't have the time today. So this is the way how you can generate that API. But here, I don't want to mix up this approach because later when my application grows, I may confuse कि कौन सा method web service के लिए है, कौन सा web application के लिए. So better is what? All the methods I want to make use as what? Web services only. I don't want to use the web application. So we have one solution is there. No need to write this response body to each method to make that as a web service. हम चाहते हैं कि सारे मेथड को वेब सर्विस की तरह ही ट्रीट हो, किसी एक को नहीं. In that case, what we can do, we can just comment that or remove this controller. Instead of controller, we can use @REST controller. That's it. So once you apply the REST controller, all the method will be treated as your web services. Arshad Ali, can we make two controller classes as well for separation? Yes, you can, but it's not recommended approach. Web service के लिए हमारे पास एक अलग controller होने चाहिए. Yes, and web application के लिए एक अलग controller होने चाहिए. Can we have different return type instead of a string? Yes, we can. Just one example I will show you. Now let me just conclude this. REST controller is this annotation is basically it is a combination of कौन-कौन से annotation का combination है आप बताओ? @controller plus @response body. So अगर आप कंट्रोलर यूज कर रहे हो तो बाय डिफॉल्ट जो मेथड होगा वो वेब एप्लीकेशन की तरह होगा और वो आपको फिजिकल लॉजिकल नेम ऑफ फिजिकल पेज का देगा. ये पेज का एक नाम देगा जो पेज रिजॉल्व होंगे और उस पेज का आउटपुट हमें वेब एप्लीकेशन की तरह मिलेगा. लेकिन आपने रिस्पॉन्स बॉडी एनोटेशन लगा दिया, दैट मींस इट विल बिकम अ वेब सर्विस, इट विल रिटर्न यू द रॉ डेटा. If you want to make that all the methods should be treated as web services, so instead of repeating this one response body, you just use that REST controller. Over. You stop the server, restart the application, and see the behavior. So I'm just relaunching the application once again. You can relaunch it from here also. This one. You click on that last load, it will relaunch. Or you can create it from here. Pick the main application first. And let me run the application from here. So my application is up and running. This time I'm giving the request hello. I'm getting this output. If I will give the hello to, I will get index.html. This file, this name is not going to get resolved as your HTML file. It will be returned as a normal text. Make sense? Please confirm. Now the last one, for just 2 minutes more, I'm creating one simple bean class student. And in this student class, I'm going to keep some property that is private int roll number, private string name, private string address, and private int marks. So some fields I have taken. Then after, let me generate that getter setter. And I'm taking the constructor using field and one zero argument constructor also. Over. You can take that toString method also. Now, in this method controller, what I'm going to do, I'm writing one another API, which will return the student object. So public student, return type I made as student, get student. Any method name you can take, doesn't matter. And here I'm creating the student object s1 is equal to new student, roll number 10, name, let's say that any name, address, and marks. And simply return s1. So this method will just returning the student object. I'm annotating this one as a request mapping, and here slash student. Now let's stop the server and relaunch the application once again. Spring Boot restart. This time, if I will give this endpoint student, it will just give me the which type of data. Let's see here. Student. And you will notice this is your data, raw data. Kiss format में ये data? JSON. It is in the JSON form, right? This is the default format. By using that API endpoint, you have returned your one JSON object. So it is very simple to create our API. In tomorrow's session, we are going to see some more interesting fact, how we can send that data in an XML format, what are the approach to change the port number, and how to overcome the problem of stopping the server and restarting the server, and some other interesting fact. I hope by today onwards, you'll be able to create that your REST API for small things. Not only that, you know that what is the difference between controller and REST controller. You know that what is the role of dispatcher servlet, and what is this response body annotation. Please confirm. Good. So please do practice on that and do some R&D on this particular topic, whatever Jersey and REST easy. Then after whatever this web services creation, what is the REST API. So those type of terminology try to resolve by today yourself. Tomorrow, from now onwards, we have started the fun. So we have remaining 4 session will be there this Saturday. Also, we have the session because hopefully that Saturday should be the last session. So we have to conclude lots of topic, but I hope that it should be completed. If it would not be completed, hopefully one session might overlap on Saturday. But don't worry, I already promised you I will not miss a single topic for you. We are already 15 minutes late for the session, but still I appreciate that 64 members are still there. Thank you everyone for joining this session, and we'll start the recording first.